"Do not turn around," Daniel said, which was exactly the kind of sentence guaranteed to make me turn around. I had been standing near the edge of the reception ballroom with a glass of champagne I had no intention of finishing, watching 200 people celebrate my best friend's marriage beneath strings of warm lights and white flowers. Daniel had somehow escaped his duties as groom long enough to appear beside me with an expression that immediately made me suspicious. "Why?" I asked. "Because you are going to make that face." "What face?" "The one you are making right now." I turned anyway, following his glance across the room, and for a second the music seemed to disappear. Noah Bennett was standing about 30 feet away. 11 years had passed since I had last seen him, but recognition came before thought. He was taller than I remembered, or maybe adulthood simply carried differently on him. His dark hair was shorter now, his shoulders broader beneath a charcoal suit, and there was a calmness in his face that had not existed when we were 18. Still, I knew him instantly. My first crush was standing 30 feet away, and somehow 18 years old felt like yesterday. "You invited Noah?" I asked. Daniel gave me an apologetic look. "Emily knows him through work. I did not realize he was coming until yesterday. And you forgot to mention that." I considered mentioning it. "That is not the same thing." "You seemed happy." "I am happy. You are holding that champagne like it personally offended you." I looked down at the glass. He was right. I had never liked champagne. No one knew that once. The thought arrived without permission, carrying memories I had spent years filing into a part of my mind labeled finished. Friday nights driving nowhere because we were 18 and gasoline was cheaper than entertainment. Noah stealing fries from my plate after insisting he was not hungry. Graduation week. A conversation in his old car that had ended before either of us said what we actually meant. Then Seattle. Silence. 11 years. "Ethan," Daniel said more quietly, "are you okay?" "Of course." That sounded convincing. "Go be married." Daniel laughed. "Best decision I made all day." He squeezed my shoulder before disappearing back toward Emily and their waiting guests. I told myself I could handle one unexpected person at one wedding. Chicago was my home. Daniel was my best friend. I was 29 years old, not the nervous teenager who once spent an entire school year pretending Noah Bennett was only his best friend. Then Noah looked directly at me. The distance between us suddenly felt much shorter than 30 feet. His expression changed first with surprise, then something softer I could not identify. For one ridiculous second, neither of us moved. A server passed between us carrying a tray of drinks, briefly breaking the line of sight. When she moved away, Noah was still looking at me. Then he smiled. It was not the polite smile you gave someone whose name you barely remembered. I knew that smile. I remembered it from parking lots after football games, from late-night diners, from mornings when he waited beside my locker before first period. My chest tightened around a feeling I had no business recognizing after 11 years. Noah said something to the man beside him, handed over his drink, and started walking toward me. I could have moved. I could have found Daniel, gone outside, or suddenly developed an intense interest in the wedding cake. Instead, I stayed exactly where I was, watching the first person I had ever wanted and never told cross the ballroom one measured step at a time. Noah stopped a few feet in front of me, and for one strange moment we simply looked at each other as if 11 years required some kind of formal acknowledgement before either of us could speak. "Hey, Ethan," he finally said. Hearing my name in his voice did something unexpectedly familiar to me. "Hey, Noah." He smiled, and I noticed his right hand move to the cuff of his jacket, adjusting it even though there was nothing wrong with it. He used to do that with his sleeves whenever he was nervous. Apparently some things survived adulthood. "I did not know you would be here," I said. I could say the same thing. Daniel is my best friend. Right? I figured that out when you were standing beside him during the ceremony. I nodded, immediately aware that this conversation had somehow become both painfully ordinary and impossible to escape. Noah glanced at the champagne in my hand. "You still hate champagne?" I looked down at the glass. "You remember that? You complained about it for 20 minutes at Jessica Morgan's graduation party. That was 11 years ago. It was terrible champagne." I laughed before I could stop myself. Noah laughed too, and suddenly I remembered exactly how easy this used to be. "So, Chicago?" he asked. "Still here. I am a graphic designer now, mostly branding and digital campaigns." "That makes sense. What does that mean?" You redesigned every flyer our senior class ever made because you said the fonts were emotionally upsetting. They were. Noah grinned. I knew you would say that. What about you? Seattle. Architecture. You actually did it. His expression softened. You remember? You spent half of senior year drawing buildings in the margins of your chemistry notes. Those buildings were more useful than chemistry. We stood there smiling like two people comparing old photographs, except the photographs were inside our heads. I wanted to ask 100 questions. Why had we stopped talking? Had he ever thought about me? Had that night in his car meant anything to him? Instead, I asked, how long have you been in Seattle? Almost 11 years. There it was, the entire distance between us reduced to 3 words. Before I could respond, Daniel appeared beside us. Good. You found each other. I turned toward him. Did you arrange this? I am getting married, Ethan. I barely arranged my own dinner. Noah laughed. Daniel looked pleased with himself anyway. Someone called his name from across the room, and he pointed at us before leaving. Talk. Be normal. Excellent advice, Noah said. He has always been subtle. The band shifted into a louder song, and guests began moving toward the dance floor. Noah stepped slightly closer so I could hear him. Are you staying for the whole reception? That is usually how being the groom's best friend works. Right. His fingers returned to his cuff. There it was again. Nervous. Noah Bennett was. Nervous talking to me. That realization should not have mattered, but it did. I am glad you are here, he said. The simplicity of it caught me off guard. I am glad you are here too. His eyes stayed on mine for an extra second. Then someone called his name from behind him. Noah glanced back toward a group near the bar before looking at me again. I should go say hello, but do not disappear, okay? My chest tightened at the choice of words. Disappear. Of all the things he could have said, I will be around. Good. He smiled and walked away. I watched him cross the room, telling myself not to turn a 5-minute conversation into something larger. Then I noticed Noah glance back at me once before reaching his friends, and one question settled into my mind with uncomfortable clarity. If 11 years had changed everything, why did he still remember the smallest things about me? For the next 20 minutes, I tried to behave like a reasonable adult at my best friend's wedding, which mostly meant talking to people while remaining painfully aware of where Noah was standing. I congratulated Daniel's parents, spoke with 2 former classmates, and accepted a glass of sparkling water from a server after finally abandoning the champagne. None of it stopped my mind from returning to the same memory. Senior year. Noah's old silver Honda parked beneath a streetlight 3 blocks from my parents' house. It had been the night before he left Illinois for Seattle, and we had spent nearly 2 hours driving around because neither of us wanted to admit we were saying goodbye. I remembered the dashboard glowing blue. I remembered a fast food cup in the console. Most of all, I remembered Noah turning toward me after a long silence and saying, "There is something I should have told you a long time ago." My 18-year-old heart had immediately decided that whatever came next would either change everything or destroy the friendship I valued most. So I had done what frightened 18-year-olds sometimes do. I interrupted him. I made a joke about his terrible driving, asked whether he had finished packing, and changed the subject so quickly that Noah never returned to whatever he had been about to say. For years, I told myself it probably meant nothing. Maybe he wanted to apologize for leaving. Maybe he wanted to tell me about someone he liked. Maybe I had invented the importance because I had been hopelessly in love with him. Across the ballroom, Noah laughed at something a man beside him said, pulling me back into the present. 11 years had changed the setting, but not my ability to notice him in a crowded room. You are staring, a familiar voice said. I turned and found Daniel beside me again. Should you not be dancing with your wife? Emily is talking to her grandmother. I have been temporarily released. Congratulations. Daniel followed my gaze and immediately understood. That is Noah's colleague, by the way. I did not ask. You were thinking loudly. I was remembering something. Daniel's expression shifted. He knew enough about Noah to know there had been history, although not every detail. Good memory or bad memory? Unfinished. Daniel nodded as if that answer made perfect sense. Before he could say anything else, Emily appeared and rescued him for photographs. I moved toward the quieter edge of the ballroom, but a few minutes later Noah found me again. This time he carried 2 glasses of sparkling water. I thought this was safer, he said, handing one to me. You remembered. Apparently, I remember an unreasonable amount about you. I looked at him. He seemed to realize what he had admitted because his hand immediately went to his cuff. You still do that, I said. Do what? Fix your sleeve when you are nervous. Noah looked down at his hand and laughed softly. I did not know anyone noticed. I noticed. Something changed in his expression. The noise of the reception seemed farther away. You noticed a lot back then, he said. So did you. For a moment, neither of us looked away. I could almost see that old Honda around us again, the dark street outside. The sentence Noah had never finished. I wanted to ask him now. 11 years late, maybe, but finally ask. Noah, that night before you moved to Seattle. His smile disappeared, replaced by recognition. You remember that? I remember you were going to. Tell me something. Noah became very still. My pulse quickened. What was it? He looked at me as if deciding whether 11 years had made the answer easier or more dangerous. Then someone from the wedding party called for him from across the room. Noah glanced toward the voice, then back at me. That conversation deserves more than 30 seconds between wedding photos. He stepped backward, but his eyes stayed on mine. Do not let me leave tonight without answering you. And suddenly the question I had buried at 18 was alive again. For the next half hour, Noah was repeatedly pulled into photographs, introductions, and conversations, leaving me alone with a question I had successfully avoided for 11 years. I told myself not to build an entire explanation around one unfinished sentence from high school, but that became considerably harder when I saw Noah near the bar with the same man Daniel had identified as his colleague. The man was tall, well-dressed, and comfortable enough around Noah to lean close while they talked over the music. Noah laughed, and something unpleasant tightened in my chest. It was jealousy, which was ridiculous. I had no claim on Noah. I had not seen him since we were 18. I did not even know whether he was single, and after 11 years, I certainly had no right to care if he was not. You look deeply concerned about the floral arrangements, Emily said beside me. I turned toward the bride. They are very complicated flowers. She smiled. Daniel warned me you do this. Do what? Pretend you are thinking about something completely different from what you are obviously thinking about. I glanced toward Noah again before I could stop myself. Emily followed my gaze. Oh, please do not make that sound. What sound? The sound that means Daniel told you something. Daniel told me almost nothing. He said you and Noah were close in high school. We were. Emily looked toward the bar. For what it is worth, Marcus is not his boyfriend. I stared at her. I did not ask. You did not have to. Apparently, everyone at this wedding could read my mind. Marcus works with Noah, she continued. He helped design the renovation for my company's Seattle office. That is how I know them. The architecture firm. She laughed. Relax, Ethan. I am completely relaxed. You are holding sparkling water like it owes you money. Before I could defend myself, Daniel called Emily back toward the dance floor. She left with an amused smile, and I stood there feeling both relieved and embarrassed by how relieved I was. That was the part one could not explain away. Seeing Noah again had not simply reminded me of an old crush. It had awakened reactions that belonged very much to the present. I looked toward the bar again, but Noah was gone. For a moment, I wondered whether he had left, and the possibility bothered me more than it should have. Then I heard his voice behind me. You disappeared. I turned. Noah stood there without his jacket now, his tie slightly loosened after hours of wedding festivities. I have been standing in roughly the same 20-foot area all evening. I looked for you near the tables. Why? The question came out more directly than I intended. Noah hesitated. His fingers moved toward his cuff before he remembered his jacket was gone, and he smiled at himself. Because I told you I would answer your question. Right. He glanced toward the crowded ballroom. Not here. Where? There is a terrace outside the hallway. It is quieter. I followed him past the reception tables and through a set of glass doors. Cool Illinois air met us immediately, carrying the faint scent of rain. The music became a distant rhythm behind the doors. For the first time that evening, there was nobody standing between us, calling our names, or waiting for photographs. Noah rested his hands against the terrace railing and looked out toward the dark lawn. Before I answer what you asked, he said, I need to ask you something first. His tone had changed. The easy humor was gone. Okay. He turned toward me. Did I do something to you back then? I frowned. What do you mean? After I moved. Noah held my gaze. You stopped answering me. For a second, I thought I had misunderstood him. Noah, you were the one who disappeared. His expression shifted from nervousness to genuine confusion. Ethan, I thought you disappeared from me. For several seconds, I could only stare at him. The terrace lights reflected faintly against the glass doors behind us, and through them I could see people dancing as if nothing important had just shifted outside. That does not make sense, I said. Noah gave a short, confused laugh. That is exactly what I was thinking. You moved to Seattle, Noah? I called you twice that first week. His expression changed. I never got those calls. I left a voicemail. On my old number? I stopped. What old number? My phone broke during the move. I changed numbers a few days after I got to Seattle. I searched my memory. At 18, details like phone plans and forwarding numbers had seemed insignificant compared with the larger fact that my best friend was suddenly 2,000 miles away. You never told me. I tried. Noah leaned back against the railing. I sent you the new number. How? A message? To my phone. Yes. Now it was my turn to laugh, although nothing felt funny. My family changed carriers that summer. I got a new number too. Noah stared at me. When? A few days after you left. We stood there processing the absurd possibility that our entire understanding of those weeks had been built on crossed wires. Wait, I said. Daniel had my number. I barely knew Daniel then. That was true. Daniel and I had become close during college, after Noah moved away. Social media existed, I said. Technically. Noah smiled faintly. You remember how little we used it then. I sent you a friend request months later. I thought you were being polite. I thought you ignored me. I accepted it. 8 months later. I was stubborn. So was I. The admission settled between us without blame. We had both been 18, uncertain, and far too willing to interpret silence as an answer. I looked through the glass at the reception, then back at him. You asked if you did something to me. Yeah. I thought you left and decided whatever we had was part of high school. Noah's face softened. Whatever we had. I immediately regretted the phrase. You know what I mean. I'm not sure I do. His voice was gentle, but he did not rescue me from the question. I took a breath. We were close. We were. And then we were not. Noah nodded slowly. I thought that was your choice. I thought it was yours. The faintest smile appeared on his face, not because the situation was amusing, but because the symmetry was almost unbelievable. We were idiots. We were 18. Those things are not mutually exclusive. I laughed, and some of the tension finally broke. Then I remembered why we had come outside in the first place. You still have not answered my question. Noah looked at me carefully. About that night in my car. You said there was something you should have told me. His smile disappeared. There was. And he looked toward the dark lawn for a moment before returning his attention to me. I did not finish the sentence because you changed the subject. I know. I thought you knew what I was trying to say and did not want to hear it. My heartbeat seemed suddenly louder than the distant music. I did not know. Noah studied my face as if testing whether he believed me. Then maybe I misunderstood more than just the phone calls. What were you going to tell me? I asked. He inhaled slowly. I was going to tell you that leaving Illinois was not the part that scared me. I waited. Noah's voice became quieter. The part that scared me was leaving you. For a moment, I forgot about the music behind us, the wedding, and the years between 18 and 29. Noah had said the one thing I had once wanted desperately to hear, except he had said it 11 years too late. You were scared of leaving me? I asked. Yes. He looked almost embarrassed by how simple the answer was. Because you were my best friend, but that was not the whole reason. My heart started beating faster. Noah glanced toward the ballroom before continuing. After I got to Seattle, I kept thinking about that night in the car. I convinced myself you changed the subject because you understood what I was trying to tell you. I did not. I know that now. So what happened? Noah hesitated. I sent you a message. The words landed differently after everything we had just discovered about our phone numbers. What message? A long one. Probably too long. A nervous smile appeared. I told you I missed you. I told you leaving felt wrong because I had spent most of senior year trying to pretend I did not have feelings for my best friend. I stared at him. You actually wrote that? Every humiliating word. And sent it? Yes. To my old number. Noah nodded. Apparently. I looked away, trying to process the absurdity of it. Somewhere, 11 years ago, a confession had traveled toward a phone number that no longer belonged to me. Noah had waited for an answer I never knew he wanted. I never saw it, I said. I believe you. If I had, I stopped. Noah waited. I had spent years imagining what might have happened if he had finished that sentence in his car, but there was something else he deserved to know. I wrote something too. His eyebrows lifted. What? About a month after you moved. I was using my laptop late one night, and I wrote you an email. You had my email address. Yes. So why did I never get it? Because I never sent it. Noah stared at me before giving a quiet laugh. Of course you did not. I was 18 and terrified. What did it say? I felt strangely more nervous answering that question at 29 than I had while writing the email at 18. That I missed you. That I was angry you left because everything felt different without you. And that the reason it felt different was because I had liked you for a long time. Noah became completely still. How long? I do not know. Maybe junior year. Maybe earlier. Ethan. I know. I like you too. The sentence was gentle, almost painfully ordinary after 11 years of uncertainty. I laughed under my breath. We really were idiots. Remarkably talented ones. For the first time, the past did not feel mysterious. It felt clear, and somehow that clarity was both comforting and sad. We had not rejected each other. We had simply been two frightened teenagers standing on opposite sides of the same silence. Noah stepped a little closer, but he did not reach for me. I spent years thinking you chose not to answer. I spent years thinking you chose not to come back. I am sorry. So am I. He shook his head. Maybe we should stop apologizing for being 18. I smiled. That might take some practice. Through the glass doors, the band began another song and guests moved toward the dance floor. Noah looked inside, then back at me. There is one problem. Only one. We know what we felt 11 years ago. His expression became thoughtful. We have no idea who we are now. That truth settled between us more heavily than the confession. I wanted the past to provide an easy answer, but Noah was right. The boy I had loved existed mostly in memory, and the man standing in front of me had lived an entire life I knew nothing about. Then maybe, I said, we should stop trying to finish a conversation from when we were 18. Noah held my gaze. And start a new one? Exactly. His smile returned slowly. Okay, Ethan, tell me something about you I do not already know. For the next 40 minutes, Noah and I stayed on the terrace until the cool air finally convinced us to return inside, but we did not return to the past. That became our unspoken rule. Instead of asking what we had missed, we started asking what had happened while we were apart. I told him about studying design in Chicago, the terrible apartment I rented after college, and the small advertising agency where I worked before finally landing a job that let me create campaigns I actually cared about. Noah told me about architecture school, his first exhausting years at a Seattle firm, and the apartment he had slowly turned into something that finally felt like home. Do you still draw buildings when you are bored? I asked. Now people pay me to draw buildings when I am stressed. That sounds like adulthood. It is mostly deadlines with better coffee. I laughed. It was strange how familiar his humor felt while everything else about him was new. At 18, Noah had wanted to design enormous buildings that changed city skylines. At 30, he talked more passionately about libraries, community centers, and affordable housing projects. I realized I liked listening to the person he had become. That mattered more than I expected. Back inside, we found a quiet table near the edge of the reception. Daniel passed us once and gave me a look that was far too pleased, but thankfully he kept walking. Noah asked about my family. I asked about his. We compared cities, terrible first jobs, favorite restaurants, and the embarrassing number of houseplants Noah claimed were currently surviving in his apartment. 7, he said. 7 is not embarrassing. 9 if you count the 2 I am trying to save. That sounds like 11 plants with complicated paperwork. Noah laughed. You are still impossible. You have known me again for less than 2 hours. Some conclusions do not require extensive research. The conversation became easier with every minute, but underneath it was a question neither of us said aloud. Was this connection real, or were we simply enjoying the comfort of being remembered? I eventually looked around the ballroom at the photographs, flowers, and couples dancing beneath warm lights. This place is dangerous. Noah raised an eyebrow. The wedding venue? For us. His smile faded slightly. Because everything tonight is designed to make people sentimental. He understood immediately. You think this is nostalgia? I think it could be. I looked at him. We cannot fall in love with memories and pretend that means we know each other now. Noah was quiet for a moment, then nodded. I agree. His answer surprised me. That easily? What did you expect me to say? Something romantic and irresponsible. I am an architect. We have building codes. I laughed again. Noah leaned forward, his expression warmer. Ethan, finding out you like me back then means more to me than I can explain. But I do not want 18-year-old Noah making decisions for 30-year-old me. Good. And I do not want you choosing me because you finally got the answer you wanted 11 years ago. That landed harder because it was exactly what I needed to hear. So what do we do? I asked. Noah looked around the reception, then back at me. We talk. We learn who we are now. No promises based on high school. That sounds suspiciously mature. I hate it too. I smiled. Deal. Noah extended his hand across the table as if we were negotiating a contract. I looked at it before placing mine in his. His hand was warm, familiar and unfamiliar at once. We shook once, laughing at ourselves, and then neither of us immediately let go. That was when I understood the difference. The past had brought Noah back into my life, but the man sitting across from me was giving me a completely new reason to want him to stay. By the time the band announced the final set of songs, Noah and I had somehow spent most of the reception talking without running out of things to say. The strange part was that I no longer felt as if I were sitting with the boy I remembered. I was learning about the man who had replaced him, and I liked that man for reasons 18-year-old me could never have predicted. Noah was telling me about a community library his firm had recently completed when the music softened and several couples moved onto the dance floor. He stopped mid-sentence and looked toward them. What? I asked. I am considering doing something potentially embarrassing. That description covers a lot of possibilities. He smiled. Dance with me. I stared at him. You remember I am terrible at dancing. I remember you claiming that. There is photographic evidence. Then expectations are appropriately low. I looked toward the dance floor. Daniel and Emily were already there, moving beneath the warm lights with the exhausted happiness of two people nearing the end of a very long day. Other couples joined them. Nobody seemed interested in us. One dance, I said. One dance, Noah agreed. We walked onto the floor and found a quiet place near the edge. Noah rested one hand lightly against my shoulder while I held his other hand. And for the first few seconds we both looked far too serious about something so simple. Relax, he said. I am relaxed. Your shoulders disagree. You are the architect, not the physical therapist. He laughed, and just like that, the awkwardness loosened. We moved slowly with the music, not perfectly, but well enough. I expected the moment to make me think about high school. Instead, I noticed things that belonged entirely to the present. The calm confidence in Noah's voice, the faint lines beside his eyes when he smiled, and how carefully he gave me space rather than assuming closeness simply because of our history. You know, he said after a while, I keep thinking about something. That sounds dangerous. We lost 11 years because neither of us asked the obvious question. Technically, several communication failures were involved. True, but I would rather not repeat the experiment. I looked at him. His expression had become serious. Then asked the question. Noah hesitated only briefly. Can I see you tomorrow? The simplicity of it caught me off guard. No declaration about fate. No promise that geography would somehow solve itself. Just tomorrow. What time is your flight? 3:45 in the afternoon. That does not leave much time. Coffee. You are asking someone from Chicago to trust a man from Seattle with coffee recommendations? I am willing to accept professional supervision. I smiled. Okay. Noah's eyebrows lifted. Okay. Yes, Noah. I will see you tomorrow. The relief on his face made something warm settle inside me. Good. Where are you staying? A hotel about 15 minutes from here. There is a coffee shop near the Riverwalk downtown. 10:30. 10:30. The song began winding down, but neither of us immediately moved away. Noah glanced toward our joined hands and then back at me. This feels different than I expected. What did you expect? I thought seeing you again would make me think about everything we missed. And his smile was quiet. Mostly I keep thinking about what I do not know about you yet. That answer stayed with me as the music ended. We stepped away from each other and returned to the reception, but something had shifted again. For the first time all evening, tomorrow felt more important than 11 years ago. And when Noah smiled at me from across the room a few minutes later, I realized the wedding had answered only one question. The real test would come in the morning, when there were no formal clothes, no slow songs, and no memories dressed up in warm lights. At 10:28 the next morning, I arrived at the coffee shop near the Chicago River Walk and discovered Noah already waiting by the window. Without the charcoal suit, wedding lights, and music, he looked less like someone who had stepped out of my past and more like a man I might have noticed on any ordinary Sunday morning. He wore dark jeans, a navy sweater, and a light jacket folded over the chair beside him. When he saw me, he smiled, and the feeling that answered inside me had nothing to do with high school. "You are early," I said. 2 minutes. That still counts. I was worried you might change your mind. I sat across from him. I was worried you might order for me based on what I drank 11 years ago. Noah pushed a coffee toward me. Black coffee, 1 packet of sugar. I stared at the cup. "You did exactly that." His expression immediately became uncertain. Was I wrong? I took a sip. "No, that is the problem." He laughed. Morning sunlight reflected from the buildings outside, and people moved along the river without any awareness that I was sitting across from someone who had once occupied an enormous part of my life. There were no flowers, no slow songs, and no champagne. Somehow, the conversation was still easy. We talked about Chicago neighborhoods, Seattle weather, work schedules, travel, and the ordinary routines that had shaped our lives. Noah admitted that he cooked when stressed. I admitted that most of my plans survived through luck rather than skill. He told me he called his mother every Sunday. I told him I still drove to my parents' house twice a month for dinner. None of it was dramatic, and that was exactly why it mattered. Eventually, Noah checked the time and sighed. I should leave for the airport in about an hour. The reminder changed the atmosphere between us. Right. I hate that word suddenly. Airport. Leave. I looked down at my coffee. We knew you were going back. I know. Noah leaned forward slightly. So what happens now? There was the question we had avoided all morning. I could have given him a romantic answer, but geography was real. Chicago and Seattle were more than 2,000 miles apart. We had careers, apartments, friends, and lives that could not be rearranged after one wedding. We do what we should have done 11 years ago, I said. We communicate. Noah smiled. That seems almost too reasonable. Do not worry. I am sure we can make mistakes eventually. Good. I would hate to lose our brand. I took out my phone. Give me your number. Noah did. I entered it carefully, then sent him a simple message. His phone buzzed on the table between us. He looked at the screen, then at me. Something softened in his expression. This time I got it. The words hit me harder than I expected. 11 years ago, a message had disappeared into silence. This one had traveled less than 3 feet, and somehow crossed everything between us. Reply, I said. I need proof. Noah typed something. My phone buzzed. I looked down and saw 3 words. Still here, Ethan. I smiled. Acceptable. When it was finally time to leave, we walked outside together. Noah stopped on the sidewalk and adjusted the strap of his travel bag. Chicago to Seattle is a long way. It is. I do not know what this becomes. Neither do I. He nodded, appreciating the honesty. I looked at him and smiled. But it is not 11 years long. Noah laughed softly. No, it is definitely not. Then he headed toward his waiting rideshare. And for the first time in my life, watching Noah leave did not feel like an ending. My phone was already in my hand. And this time, we both knew how to reach each other. Noah sent me a message before his flight even left Chicago. It was a photograph of the airport coffee in his hand with one sentence underneath it. Your recommendation was better. I smiled at my phone in the middle of my apartment like someone who had forgotten how ridiculous happiness could look from the outside. I replied before I could overthink it. That was how the next few weeks began. Not with dramatic declarations, but with ordinary messages that slowly became part of my day. Noah sent photographs of Seattle rain, buildings he admired, and occasional disasters from his kitchen. I sent him unfinished design concepts, Chicago sunsets reflected in office windows, and complaints about Daniel suddenly believing marriage had made him qualified to give relationship advice. We talked most evenings, sometimes for 10 minutes, and sometimes until midnight. The time difference was only 2 hours, but our schedules were not always cooperative. Noah had project deadlines. I had client presentations. Some nights one of us was too tired to say much. The important thing was that neither of us treated silence as rejection anymore. If Noah was busy, he told me. If I needed to disappear into work for an afternoon, I said so. It seemed almost absurd that communication could feel romantic, But after losing 11 years to assumptions, reliability mattered. 3 weeks after the wedding, Noah called on a Thursday night while I was finishing dinner. "I have a question," he said. "That phrase has historically caused problems between us. I have learned from my mistakes. Proceed carefully. I have a project meeting in Chicago next month." I stopped moving. "You do? 2 days of meetings downtown. And you waited until now to tell me?" "I found out this afternoon." His voice softened. "I was wondering if you might be free Friday night." "For what?" "Dinner. Preferably somewhere without a wedding happening around us." I smiled. "That is a very specific requirement. I think we should test whether we can survive a second meeting without formal wear." "We already had coffee." "Then consider this advanced testing." "Friday works." The month passed more slowly after that. When Noah finally arrived in Chicago, I met him at a small Italian restaurant in River North. Seeing him again was different from seeing him at the wedding. There was no shock this time, no 11-year history crashing into one moment. I simply saw Noah walk through the restaurant door, spot me, and smile. That was enough. We talked through dinner and then walked several blocks along the river despite the cool evening air. At one point, Noah stopped near the railing and looked at the lights reflected across the water. "I was worried this would feel different," he admitted. "Different how?" "Like maybe the wedding did all the work for us." I understood immediately. "And does it?" He turned toward me. "No." The answer came without hesitation. I felt something inside me settle. "Good." Noah smiled. "That is all you have." I was trying to be emotionally controlled. "You were never good at that. You have 11-year-old information. I have 4 weeks of updated research." I laughed, and Noah did too. Then the moment became quiet. He did not move closer or turn it into something larger than it needed to be. He simply stood beside me while Chicago moved around us. "Ethan," he said after a moment, "I do not want distance to turn this into another thing we almost had." I looked at him. "Neither do I." "Then maybe we should decide what trying actually means." This time, neither of us looked away from the question. We stayed beside the river for several minutes before either of us spoke again. The question sounded simple, but trying meant more than sending messages when we had time. It meant deciding whether two lives separated by more than 2,000 miles could make room for something neither of us wanted to lose again. "I do not think we need a 5-year plan tonight," I said. Noah smiled. "Good, because I left my spreadsheets at the hotel." "You have relationship spreadsheets?" "I am an architect. We organize things." "That is deeply concerning." His laugh broke the tension, but only briefly. "I mean it, Ethan. I want to try this. I just do not want us making promises we cannot realistically keep." "Neither do I." I leaned against the railing and looked across the river. "So we start small. Calls. Visits when they make sense. We tell each other when something is bothering us instead of inventing explanations." That last one feels specifically targeted. It applies equally. Noah nodded. "Agreed." We decided that I would visit Seattle 6 weeks later, when my workload was lighter. Until then, we would keep doing what had already been working. Nothing heroic. Nothing impossible. Just consistency. When Noah returned to Seattle after his meetings, our conversations changed in small ways. We stopped behaving as if every call needed to be memorable. Sometimes he called while cooking dinner and left his phone on the counter while we talked. Sometimes I answered while folding laundry. Once, we spent nearly 20 minutes discussing whether a chair Noah wanted for his apartment was worth the price. "It looks uncomfortable," I said. "It is beautifully designed." "Those are not the same thing. You are a designer. You should understand. I design things people can actually use." That was unnecessarily personal. These ordinary conversations reassured me more than any grand confession could have. 6 weeks later, my flight landed in Seattle shortly after noon on a Friday. Noah was waiting near passenger pickup in a dark blue jacket, one hand in his pocket and the other holding 2 coffees. I recognized him immediately, but this time there was no shock. I walked toward him smiling. "You remembered the sugar. I have been training for this moment since Chicago." He handed me the cup, then hesitated. For a second, both of us seemed unsure whether a handshake would be absurd and whether anything more would be too much. I solved it by opening my arms. Noah smiled and hugged me. It was brief, warm, and surprisingly natural. "Welcome to Seattle," he said. "It is raining." I wanted to provide an authentic experience. Over the weekend, Noah showed me his actual life rather than a tourist version of the city. We visited his favorite neighborhood coffee shop, walked through a weekend market, and stopped outside the community library he had helped design. I met 2 of his friends over dinner and saw the apartment with the supposedly 9 surviving plants. There were 11. You lied, I said. 2 recovered. By Sunday morning, I understood something important. Noah fit into Chicago when he visited me, but I could fit into Seattle too. Neither city magically solved the distance. Yet the distance no longer felt abstract. It was something measurable, manageable, and worth discussing. Before my afternoon flight, Noah and I sat near the window of his apartment with coffee. Was this weird, he asked. Less weird than seeing you at a wedding after 11 years. That is a low standard. Then no. It was good. Noah looked relieved. Good enough to do again? I smiled. Definitely. He reached across the small table and took my hand. I think we are actually doing this. I looked at our hands, then at him. I think we are. For once. Neither of us needed more explanation. For the next 4 months, Noah and I became experts at airports, calendars, and making ordinary time feel valuable. He came to Chicago twice, and I returned to Seattle once. Between visits, we talked almost every day, but the distance eventually stopped feeling romantic and started feeling exactly like what it was, difficult. One Tuesday evening, after a long client meeting had left me exhausted, Noah called while I was reheating dinner. You sound tired, he said. I am. Bad day. Long day. There was a pause. Do you want to talk about it? Normally I would have said yes, but that night I wanted someone beside me, not a voice through a phone. Not really. Noah became quiet. Okay. I immediately heard the disappointment in his voice and hated myself for resenting something he could not control. That came out wrong, I said. I know you are trying. So are you. I just wish trying did not involve checking airline prices every month. Another silence followed. 11 years ago, silence would have frightened me into retreating. This time I stayed. Are you unhappy? Noah asked. No. I am frustrated because I am happy with you, and you live 2,000 miles away. He exhaled slowly. That is exactly how I feel. The honesty changed the conversation. Instead of pretending distance was manageable forever, we finally discussed what would have to happen if this relationship became permanent. My career was in Chicago. Noah's firm was in Seattle. My family lived nearby, while his parents had moved to Oregon several years earlier. Neither of us wanted the other to sacrifice an entire life out of guilt. We do not have to solve it tonight, Noah said. But we should stop pretending the question is not coming. He was right. 2 weeks later, something unexpected happened. My company announced plans to open a small West Coast creative team, and my director asked whether I would consider leading it. The location had not been finalized, but Seattle was one of 3 cities under consideration. I read the internal email 3 times before calling Noah. I need you to promise not to react until I finish explaining. That sounds alarming. I told him about the expansion, the possible promotion, and the 3 candidate cities. Noah stayed remarkably quiet. You can react now, I said. Seattle? Possibly. Because of me? No. I answered immediately because that mattered. The company approached me. I did not request it. Would you want the job if I were not here? That question mattered even more. I looked around my Chicago apartment before answering. I think I would. It is a leadership role, better pay, and the kind of work I have been trying to move toward. Noah was silent for a second. Then I hope you get it. That is all. What do you want me to say? I do not know. Something dramatically romantic. He laughed softly. Fine. I desperately hope corporate expansion delivers my boyfriend to Seattle. I froze. Noah did too. Neither of us had used that word before. Your boyfriend? I asked. Apparently my mouth made an executive decision. I smiled so hard my face hurt. I am not objecting. His voice softened. Neither am I. 3 weeks later, my director called me into her office. Seattle had been selected, and the leadership position was mine if I wanted it. I asked for 24 hours, went home, and considered every reason to stay and every reason to go. Then I called Noah. I am taking the job, I said. He was quiet long enough that I could hear him breathing. Are you sure? Yes. Because it is right for my career. I paused. And because there happens to be someone in Seattle I would like to stop missing through a screen. Noah laughed, but his voice sounded unsteady with emotion. When, about 3 months, for 11 years, distance had represented everything we failed to say. Now, for the first time, it had an expiration date. 3 months later, I stood outside Seattle-Tacoma International Airport with 2 suitcases, one overstuffed carry-on, and the strange feeling that my life had finally caught up with a decision my heart had made months earlier. Noah pulled up near passenger pickup, climbed out, and looked at the luggage beside me. "That is everything?" he asked. "The moving company has everything else. So your entire survival depends on those bags arriving safely. Please do not make me nervous." He smiled and opened his arms. I stepped into them without hesitation. There had been a time when seeing Noah meant remembering everything we had lost. Now it meant arriving somewhere. My new apartment was about 15 minutes from his, close enough that neither of us needed to pretend moving to Seattle meant immediately sharing an address. That had been intentional. We wanted a relationship built on choices, not on correcting the past as quickly as possible. My first weeks were busy with work, furniture deliveries, and learning a city where hills seemed to appear without warning. Noah helped when I asked, stayed out of the way when I needed space, and introduced me to his favorite places without insisting they become mine. Slowly, Seattle stopped feeling like Noah's city and started becoming part of my own life. 6 months after the move, Daniel and Emily visited for a long weekend. On Saturday evening, the 4 of us had dinner at a small restaurant near the water. Daniel waited until Noah stepped away from the table before leaning toward me. "So, should I take credit for this?" "Absolutely not. My wedding brought you together. Your wedding accidentally placed us in the same room." "That sounds like credit." Emily shook her head. "Do not encourage him." Noah returned and looked between us. "What did I miss?" "Daniel is rewriting history," I said. "Again?" Noah asked. "I like him," Emily said. Later that night, Noah and I walked home beneath a light Seattle drizzle. We had umbrellas, but barely used them. Our shoulders occasionally brushed as we walked, and there was something wonderfully ordinary about it. No ballroom, no unfinished confession, no flight waiting the next morning. At my apartment building, Noah stopped beneath the entrance light. "Do you ever think about that night?" he asked. "The wedding." "The night before I left for Seattle when we were 18. I considered the question. Sometimes. Do you wish we had figured everything out then? Once, my answer would have been immediate. 11 years had seemed like stolen time. Now I thought about the people we had become separately, the careers we had built, the mistakes that taught us how to speak honestly, and the fact that we had found each other again when we were finally capable of doing something with the truth. "I wish we had been less afraid," I said. "But I do not wish away the lives we had." Noah nodded. "Me neither." I smiled. "Besides, 18-year-old us would have made this incredibly complicated. Current us still manages that occasionally." "True." Noah reached for my hand, and I intertwined my fingers with his. Nearly a year had passed since Daniel's wedding. Noah and I still disagreed about furniture, still complained about work, and still occasionally misunderstood each other. The difference was that now we asked instead of assuming. We stayed when conversations became uncomfortable. We said what we meant. Noah looked toward my apartment door. "Coffee tomorrow morning? Black, 1 sugar." I remember. I know. That was the quiet miracle of it. He remembered who I had been, but he also knew who I was becoming. I knew the same about him. Our story had not been saved by fate, perfect timing, or an old confession finally answered. It had been saved by 2 grown men deciding that this time, when something mattered, neither of them would leave it unsaid.